Welcome to this Catalyst Foundation presentation, and thank you so much for joining us today. Let me start by saying that Catalyst Foundation acknowledges and respects the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land we are presenting on today, and their continuing connection to land, sea, and community. We recognize the diversity of Aboriginal people and the importance of land, culture, and heritage to the elders and their communities. Catalyst Foundation desires to walk together with the Aboriginal community in parallel on a two-way journey of cultural and knowledge exchange. Catalyst Foundation is a charitable, not-for-profit organization and a leading provider of community information in South Australia. We connect people to services and we provide free and independent information to all South Australians. Reach out to see how we can help. Visit us at www.catalystfoundation.com.au, follow us on Facebook, or give us a call at 08-8168-8776. So let's start. So I'm going to present to you John Dunsford. Without further ado, John?
Thanks, Caitlin. Just before we start, my little message box says there's 12 people in the waiting room. Does that mean we still have to access?
I will admit everyone.
Okay.
I thought that I admitted everyone before, but I didn't, so I'm going to do a brief introduction again. Hello, everyone who's just joined us. My name is Caitlin, and I'm going to be hosting today's Catalyst Foundation presentation. And our presenter is John Dunsford, our digital literacy volunteer. And he's going to be talking to you all about scams, what they are, what you can do if you feel you're a victim of one, and who you can contact in case you feel like you've fallen prey to a scam. So we're going to get started now, and I'm going to pass you over to John Dunsford. And please feel free to ask questions in the chat box. Introduce yourself, and John's going to get to all of the questions he can at the middle of the presentation as well as at the end. So please feel free to welcome John now, and we're going to get into our presentation now.
Thanks, Caitlin. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Catalyst's first Scam Safe webinar. We've undertaken these sessions before face-to-face, but this is the first one we've delivered online in this format anyway. Scams, everyone talks about scams these days, and they certainly is a topical or a topic of conversation. If you're unlucky, like a lot of us, you may well be exposed to scams on almost a daily basis. Phone calls particularly seem to be very, very prominent these days. And potentially even more so during this period of COVID-19 lockdowns and so on, whilst it might be that scams dropped off a little bit in the earlier days, they seem to have ramped up now, particularly those telephone calls. According to the statistics that are gathered by various government agencies, last year Australians lost some $600 million to various scams. We'll talk about a little bit more about just what range of scams people have been exposed to and just the breakdown of those sorts of numbers. But before we get into that, I just wanted to share with you a couple of stories that have come my way over the last couple of weeks or so. I'm sure a lot of you would be PayPal members, and you may well have received an email from PayPal indicating that, again, they've been targeted by scammers, particularly emails that purport to be from PayPal are popping up. And they too have expressed concern about that and have provided information to members about how to avoid being sucked in by those sorts of emails. So, I mean, that's a biggie with PayPal. We also became aware a week or so ago about Bitcoin scams. So Bitcoins, if you're not familiar, is this crypto or digital currency that is pervading the market. And in this particular case, celebrity names were used by the scammers to try and encourage us to get involved. They were using names like Dick Smith, Waleed Ali, David Koch, to name just a couple. And in this particular example, an elderly gentleman was exposed to that scam, initially decided to invest a small amount of money, but in the end, unfortunately, allowed himself to be exposed to that scam to the tune of some $80,000, which was a pretty sad outcome. But he was trusting the people that approached him because of those celebrity names. So again, it just shows a lot of caution we need to be on top of this all the time. I also picked up a Sunday Mail letter, again, a week or two ago, from a person who'd written in indicating that, yeah, scammers have been quiet from her point of view, phone calls and so on, for a while, back in perhaps April, May, but we're now ramping up. And she got a phone call, allegedly from the Visa department of her bank, indicating a strange debit had occurred. Well, fortunately, in her case, she decided to hang up and contact the bank, and she found out that, in fact, it was a scam. There was no dodgy debits on her account and so on. So again, just another example of the sort of things that are coming our way. So let's get into the presentation. As you can see, the slide's been in front of you for a little while. Scams, a dishonest attempt to basically get money out of you, or in fact, even more so now, perhaps take your identities. In other words, result in identity theft. And particularly important, that issue for folk. So the range of scams that are out there, and this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, but you can see there that the incidence of COVID-19 has resulted in perhaps not just an increased number, but an increased variation of scams. Scammers are becoming a little bit more creative in how they approach us. And generally they are about trying to gain your personal information, which of course can then lead to raiding your bank accounts and so on, but even worse than that, just taking your identity and purporting to be someone they're not. So again, that flows into things like buying and selling. If you're a buyer and seller online, the likes of Gumtree, eBay and so on, can certainly result in you being led astray, if you like, by those particular scammers who purport to be representing, as I said, perhaps Gumtree, eBay and so on. Even fake charities can pop up where they're seeking funds to support what might seem to be quite a legitimate charity, but of course in this case they may not be. Threats and extortion, this is about, and we will talk a little bit more in detail about some of those, about an approach where it says, you know, you need to provide me some money because I'm ill or I'm a friend or those sorts of things, or you know, the grandkids are in strife or so on. Investment scams tend to be the top of the pops in terms of total dollars. And bearing in mind that some of them appear to be the get rich quick schemes, and often, of course, if they are of that nature, then they're probably not legitimate. Lotteries, dating and friendship, the romance scams, again, seem to be about second in line in terms of total losses of money and so on. So right down through mobile phones and security of them, which we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. So what are the numbers? Right at the outset, Australia lost, as I said earlier on, over $600 million when you look at all the agencies that are involved in scams and so on, reported their total dollars. But from ScamWatch's point of view, and ScamWatch is a government-run organisation that will both receives scam reports and reports on a monthly basis just what the total losses around scams are. So for 2019, ScamWatch collations amounted to $143 million of losses, so up from the previous year by almost $40 million, and nearly 170,000 reports. So really large increases between 18 and 19. And I guess when we start to collate this year's information, unfortunately, we will see, no doubt, a rise of a similar nature. So let's just break down some of the numbers. And for those of you who are watching those numbers, this is really only the $140 odd million reported to ScamWatch. They're the people who have the most, if you like, accurate information. So we've received that information from the ScamWatch website. So you can see here that investment scams are the top of the pops. They're the $660 odd million out of that total of 140 that ScamWatch has collated. And then dropping down to around that $30 million for dating and romance. And then the rest drop away fairly substantially. So you can see here that that notion of get rich quick or an offer that seems maybe too good to be true in this investment scam arena is the type of scam that is causing the most losses in Australia. So how do we get contacted by scammers? And again, these stats come from our friends at ScamWatch, and we can see here that over 40% of the approaches by scammers comes via telephone, whether it be your so-called landline or your mobile, depending on how they've managed to gain your numbers, will depend on where your scam tends to arrive. But nevertheless, the phone call is still the largest number of, or the largest method by which scammers will approach you. Again, within ScamWatch, you can see there 70 odd thousand reports and $30 odd million lost. The next down the line is scams via email. We will talk in a bit more detail about just how that occurs, but suffice to say, it will be an email that will arrive within your inbox, seemingly being legitimate from perhaps a utility, perhaps a government agency, and so on. And in much the same vein, text message on your phone may again purport to come from your bank, your perhaps even health fund, for example, and certainly from other government agencies. And we'll have a couple of examples of that as well. Internet, here, this is probably more about allegations of that your computer's been affected by a virus and let me help you fix it. So that's the breakdown that ScamWatch has for methods by which people will approach us. So this particular slide, if we look at the age demographics of people who are both losing money and have reported scams to ScamWatch, there's a relatively even spread across the age groups from, well, really from 25 years and upwards. It peaks, I guess, around in that 55 to 64-year-old age group, but that's still not, the numbers there are still not a lot higher than the ones around it. And you can see here, or perhaps not that clear for you, but the light teal colour is the number of losses compared to the actual number of reports in those particular age groups. So for example, if we look at the 55 to 64-year-old age group, the losses in that lighter colour represent about 23%, whereas the number of reports are around 17% of the total. So it would suggest that losses versus reports in that particular age group are relatively high. And if we try and break down the gender, then there's not a huge difference between men and women. Typically, the men seem to be more inclined to fall to the financial scams, and perhaps the women more inclined to fall into the dating and romance scams. But it's not unique to one gender or the other, but that's roughly the breakdown. So we're all exposed across age groups and gender, and it does really mean for all of us that we need to be as careful as we can be in this arena. So from these next few slides, we'll try to talk a bit more detail about the types of scams and what they might look like as they arrive on your phone or on your computer. And there's a neat little graphic here with an acronym for the name: scam, scheming, crafty, aggressive, malicious, and all those words can certainly describe the types of scams that are getting around. Bearing in mind, just as a reminder, the chat box is available to you to put those questions forward that you might have as we go along, and then we'll try and answer them through the presentation about midpoint and again at the end and see how we go. So this particular first example is an email that you might receive, which appears to be from the Australian government and appears to be from the tax office through your MyGov account. Now, those graphics all look quite legitimate, but one has to bear in mind they're not difficult to obtain from the websites of those particular organisations, and not too difficult to transplant into an email. The key to this particular one is to ensure that the origin of the email, and this doesn't just apply to one that seems to come from government, the origin of the email is in fact from the organisation that it's representing. So if we look closely here at the email address of the organisation that has sent it to you, and you might have to, on your own particular email system, you might have to click a little down arrow or click on a word that says details in order to get this extra piece of information. Sometimes it just says, in the from box, it might just say tax or something silly like that. But buried beneath that will be a detailed email address. And in this particular case, you can see that the email address is from some website called virtuoso.eu.com. So straight away, and it says on behalf of the Australian Tax Office. So it really has to raise some alarm bells, because you would expect to see if an email did arrive from an organisation such as tax, that the address would be .gov.au, not some strange sounding name like Virtuoso. So that's a giveaway in the beginning. But one needs to turn your mind to ensuring that you look at that address to check it out. In this particular one, it's suggesting that you might be eligible for a refund, and click on this link, which is in the little blue part saying get started, and that link almost certainly will take you to some sort of site that is designed to either gain your bank account details or do something fraudulent to your computer. So again, bearing in mind, always try and check the email address of the person or the organisation that's sending stuff to you, and if in doubt, don't act on it. This is a bit similar, but this is more of a text message that you might receive. Looks rather worrying. You might be arrested, you might be fined heavily, etc. You need to pay straight away. Click on this link, and again, the link is probably going to look a little strange in terms of what it's trying to tell you. And the quick message again here is, receiving a text message like this is most unlikely to come from a government agency. And so, if in doubt, delete the message, ring the organisation that it purports to come from, and check and see what they say. So this one again would be an email that you might receive suggesting perhaps that you attempted to change a password, you've done something to your email account, and there's a need for you to do something to check that out. Now, this email is not a lot different to some of the emails that Google send when you log into your Google account on a different computer, for example, or certainly if you change your password. So some of these types of emails can be quite legitimate, and it's about trying to ascertain whether this particular one that's sitting in front of you is or isn't. And I guess the message here again is, if in doubt, don't act upon it, and try and approach the organisation that's sending you this in a different manner, not clicking the link on the email that's arrived with you. But as I said, if you use a Gmail or a Google account and you do log in on a different device or a different computer at some time, then you would most likely will receive an email from Google asking you whether you just logged in, or asking you whether you'd just change your password. So they can obviously be quite legitimate, but it's about being aware of just what you've done and how you act upon that particular email approach. But bearing in mind, giving away your password, your PIN, and other sensitive information via this medium is really not appropriate. And Google won't ask you to do that either. Even if it does send an email to you, it's really a flag to say, hey, we noticed this. If it's you, that's fine. If it wasn't you, well, now we need to do something like change your passwords. Okay. This one here looks very much like a utility bill, like perhaps your local Telstra bill. Format looks very, very similar. But there are a couple of giveaways. In this case, you generally don't get addressed as something like Dear Customer. You would expect, if it was from your provider, that your name would be in that particular box. And perhaps you'd check your account number to see whether that's legitimate. But certainly, again, like I said earlier with the email allegedly from the tax office, you could also check the sender's email address to see whether that's legitimate. But certainly this idea that Dear Customer is likely to be valid is pretty low down the bottom of the chain of likelihood. And you would, again, be able to question that with your provider to determine its validity. So again, care needs to be taken that you don't act upon something that you shouldn't in this particular case. I guess what message you're gathering through all of this is clearly, if in doubt, if you're suspicious, and you need to be suspicious in this day and age, unfortunately, then don't act upon the actual message you receive, but contact your provider separately to determine validity of these things. So Caitlin mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about phishing, and I guess all these examples along the way are to some extent trying to gather information from you. And that's what this word phishing means. Spelt with a PH, as you can see there. It is about some person trying to get hold of your personal information, your bank account details, or just your identity in order to do something inappropriate, generally trying to gain money. So it's important that you're aware of that. And as I said, often those emails or those links can end up trying to remove or gather your information inappropriately. So phishing is all about someone trying to illegally, inappropriately gather your personal information. And here, another example where this is a text message that you might receive, supposedly from the bank, and it looks quite legitimate. It manages to get the name of the bank up there, but it suggests it's some sort of unusual activity has been detected, and you need to do something. And again, it will have a link in that email or that text message encouraging you to click on that and do some verification. Again, banks generally don't send out that sort of text message. I mean, banks certainly use text messages for things like secure codes and so on. If you're into online banking, you'd be familiar with that, but not to verify your personal details. So again, the message here is, if you're a member of the St. George Bank, and of course, sometimes you get messages from allegedly from organisations that you're not a member of. So that's a no-brainer. You just delete that and forget about it. But if it happens that you are a member of that particular institution, then give them a buzz and just check it out. Don't act upon the little note that arrives on your mobile phone. So these idea of extortion, threat kind of stuff, being asked for help, these little stories here try and explain them a little bit more. You may well have developed some sort of relationship with person online, and then all of a sudden they start to ask you for money for some sort of medical expense or something that's happened to them that's gone wrong. And if you've developed some sort of friendship with that person, it might seem quite legitimate. The question you've got to ask yourself is just how far do you want to go with that, and how should you act upon it? And certainly, I guess our advice is don't act upon it. In the first instance, perhaps talk to family members about that particular request. Similarly, in the same vein, you might get someone asking you to send money to help out a child or another relative. They might somehow or other purport to be someone related to you, and they need money because of some other medical expense. The last one is a bit more interesting, I think, in the sense that what we've heard anyway, that messages may arrive with you that purport to come from a grandchild needing money, perhaps not a large amount of money, but some money because of some particular problem they're in. And I guess if you are a grandparent, you may well be encouraged to do that, simply to help the kids out. But bearing in mind that that scam or that ploy is out there to try and take money away from unsuspecting people. So just keep that in mind. So this one, winning the competition, particularly one you don't remember or didn't enter. Well, I think if you're pretty confident you didn't enter it then, and you receive something of this nature, then it's quite likely to be a scam. It's perhaps come from an overseas country. It arrives in your email system, or a text message saying, well, in particular one on the right there, you've won a gift card, just click here to get hold of that. And what I'd encourage you to do here would be to have a look at this organisation, in this case, this Best Buy, to see, well, are they legitimate? Do they send out unsolicited text messages offering you free stuff? So that's one way of perhaps determining just how valid the approach is. But again, as I guess I've said quite a number of times now, if in doubt, leave it alone. If you're still a bit curious about it, do a bit of a Google search to see whether these organisations do in fact do what it's been suggested here. But always be careful. Clicking on the links in a text is probably not the best way to go. But again, this one, we receive a letter suggesting that there's some sort of inheritance due to you, perhaps even from someone you weren't even aware of. So the message here would be the same thing. Do a bit of research. Don't act immediately upon the information coming to you, and try and determine whether there's any validity to it at all. This pigeon drop scam, if you like, is often around the idea that, gee whiz, yes, you've won some money, or yes, this inheritance is due to you, but in order for us, we as a group of solicitors or administration company, or us to do that for you. We just need a small administrative fee to make the whole process work. So they're encouraging you to give up some money, perhaps not a large sum of money, but some money in order to receive this much larger sum of money or valuable object. So again, one needs to be careful, try and check just where this is coming from and who's involved before you do anything. Because again, like I said, I think right at the outset, if it seems too good to be true, then it perhaps isn't true. And as I said, this pigeon drop scam is about getting multiple people to give up what might seem to be relatively small amounts of money. But in the end, they end up quite well off, and you end up without the large sum because you've simply given away your 10, 20, 30 or numbers of dollars. So being told your computer has a virus. So this does come up from time to time, either via a phone call to you suggesting that the organisation ringing is somehow or other had some oversight of your computer and are aware of some error. Now really it's fair to say that sort of phone call telling you that someone's detected a problem with your computer is just rubbish, basically. People can't have access to your computer, unless you've provided it to them. And that's often the essence behind those phone calls. So this person will quite credibly say that, oh yes, we've detected a problem on your behalf, and if you're in front of your computer right now, let's just have a look. So that's the first alarm bell. So someone just out of the blue saying, oh, we think we've detected a problem is really not legitimate. They might ask you to open a little file on your computer which has a whole lot of numbers and letters in it, appears to be in error codes. Again, if you get that far down the path, these logs and errors codes that they will pull up really just exist on all computers and are not a virus. But then often, if you do allow that to go further with that person, they will encourage you to go to a website and download some software, which at that point may well allow them to take over your computer. And that's where life can get really quite difficult for you. So I guess what I'm saying here is, if you receive a phone call from someone out of the blue saying they've detected a problem with your computer, it is almost certainly going to be a scam. And again, if in doubt, have a chat to a family member or a friend and just get them to take you through checking your computer to make sure it's okay, not relying on that phone call. And in the same vein, sometimes visiting websites, some shopping sites even, may result in a message popping up, as you can see on the slide here and down the bottom, where you get this horrible message saying your computer may have a virus, do this. And the do this is often making a phone call. Again, you may well end up with a scammer who then offers to fix your computer for a certain amount of money. Certainly a friend of mine did allow herself to be dragged down this path and basically had her computer locked up by this person who was acting remotely. Fortunately, she didn't provide the credit card details that they were after, and at that point hung up. But her computer still needed to be kind of fixed because the person had installed some software that mucked her computer up. But so the message kind of looks valid, but again, if you're concerned, get hold of someone that you trust to check it out and see what's going on. Here, messages that might arrive in your mailbox saying, oh, look, mailbox is full. Well, again, you need to be careful. If your mail system is with a web-based mail organisation like Gmail, Hotmail, and so on, then you generally are struggling to fill up your inbox anyway, because they'll give you a fairly large quota. If it's with a provider like Big Pond and others, yes, you may well fill your mailbox up if you don't delete mail from your system periodically. But acting on this particular link, particularly if you think things are going okay, is probably not a good thing. And contact your provider, contact your internet provider to say, well, look, I've received this note, what's going on, rather than clicking on their link. So I guess that strong message still keeps coming through. Be very, very wary about clicking on links that arrive in texts and emails. In a similar vein, and if you're into online shopping, and lots of us are, you will be getting goods delivered by Australia Post, by various courier companies, and you're likely to receive text and email messages indicating the progress of that order. And often those emails quite legitimately will allow you to click a link to view the progress of that order. So this one from FedEx could be quite legitimate, because if you've made an order and you understand it's coming via FedEx, it may well encourage you to click. So this is a really important one to sort of make sure that if you have ordered stuff online, you know who's going to deliver it. And that information will generally come with the order. You'll get an indication of who's likely to bring it. And you can make sure that you can track the legitimate order as against one that looks like it's just trying to gain information. And I suppose here, if you clicked on the link and then where it takes you looks suspicious, then it's a good time to get out of it and follow the tracking of your order with direct contact through the organisation. So at this point, we've discussed a few scam examples, and I can take a little break for a couple of minutes where if you wish to put some questions to us through the chat box, that'd be really good. And Caitlin will try and perhaps distill some of those down, and we'll try and answer some before we complete the presentation. So go for it for a moment.
John, would you like to answer some questions now, or do you want to do them at the end?
I think we try and, depending on what we've got, if there are some that we can answer now.
Okay, we have a question from Kat Milner, who says they keep getting calls every few months from some agency claiming they were following up on a car accident I had. Has anyone else had this?
And I've certainly heard of those. It's not impossible, of course, that is legitimate, but what you need to do is determine who the caller is, what information they've got, and then independently phone back that organisation if it appears to be legitimate and follow that through. But there certainly are, and I've had an approach too from an insurance company who were following up on an accident that we were a witness to. That can happen, but it also may not be legitimate, and it's about ensuring who you're talking to is legitimate.
John Barry has asked, how do we know if threats to lock the computer and destroy files are real or just lock from website?
Yeah, well, like I guess tried to indicate, if you're using secure virus protection software and so on, which we'll talk about in a moment, then it's most unlikely that your computer will be able to be locked unless you allow someone to access it. And often what these scams do, if they come via phone, is that the person talking to you will ask you to go to a particular website, click on a few links, which ultimately will involve downloading some what we call remote access software. And that's where we end up in trouble. That's when you've basically given that person on the end of the phone line access to your computer, which they then can do some quite malicious things. So I think my advice would be, if you feel as if there's been a problem, then track down a reputable computer person or a friend that you trust that is reasonably au fait with computers to do that for you. Don't act on the phone call, the unsolicited phone call that might come your way, and get it checked out that way.
John, somebody has made a very, very good comment. They say, my main concern today is that for our senior clients, many of whom are over 80 years of age and live alone, some living with memory loss or mental health conditions, this person is here to pick up some tips to pass on to them to avoid scams. And they add that it's scary to hear the amount of phone scams that are going around.
Well, it is scary, but having said that, and when I was undertaking face-to-face chats with people who are looking to use tablets and so on, the technology we have is fantastic, but it is about ensuring that what you do with it is safe. So I guess it's about what use are you putting to your use are you putting your device to, and a lot of folk will happily use that to have online chats with family and so on, but may well not get into online banking and the sorts of areas where risks perhaps can be increased. So I guess I've often said to folk, well, if there's family members and friends around that can help work these things through and provide support, then that's often the best way. It's not necessarily always available, but I think we shouldn't create an environment where people are scared to use the technology, but bearing in mind that a bit of help along the way is always handy.
Okay. One person has said a good rule of thumb that they follow is that if they get something from someone they have an account with and it seems sort of fishy, they call the company directly. If they don't click on the email, they call the company directly just to make sure that the company is the one who has sent the email, not a scammer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good advice.
And one person has asked us if we have any resources to pass on to our older clients or anyone who would like to, anybody who'd like to revisit all of this information. We have a YouTube video, which is, I'm going to put the link up to right now. And it's a sort of condensed version of this webinar. It's about 15 minutes long and it's really informative, and we urge you to check it out and pass on the link. So I just sent that to you and I will post it again at the end of the presentation.
And certainly,
Tom has asked if we're going to cover Facebook scams or if you can talk about Facebook scams.
I think it's a whole new world, to be honest. Yes, there's in the same vein as having direct contact through text message and email, Facebook provides an unbelievable platform for, I guess, leading people astray. I haven't focused directly on that, and perhaps we should look more into just that issue. I mean, Facebook itself will tell you that it tries to moderate posts and so on that might not seem to be legitimate, but I guess in a quick summation, me personally, I would trust nothing that pops up on Facebook that isn't associated with perhaps your close friends or people that you know. But sure, there's a lot of information there. I haven't seen scams directly, but it's certainly not impossible that Facebook would provide an environment.
Can you tell us everything we know about tax-related scams that we should be aware of?
Well, I think the main thing here, like the first slide, that email slide suggested, receiving advice either via email or via text allegedly from the ATO is the critical one. And right now we're in tax return time, or a lot of folk are, and it does provide then that sort of topical opportunity for scammers to try and gain money out of you. And essentially what they would be after is your bank account details. So the allegation would likely be, we've got some money to repay you. Please provide your personal details so we can provide that transfer, or a credit card number or something of that nature. I mean, bearing in mind that providing your bank account number and BSB is not necessarily a terrible thing to do. Lots of companies post that information on their websites for payment and so on. And banks will say to you that that's a secure issue. But I guess personally, as an individual, you need to take some care about who you provide that information to. And ADO, if you get a message from the tax office, check it out if it doesn't seem right. And then, because most refunds are now done through either a tax agent or through the MyGov account, and that will provide to you direct information via MyGov rather than some strange email.
Great, that's really helpful. And one person has asked if the figures that you're mentioning from ScamWatch are they're Australia only, right? Not worldwide.
Correct. Yep, they're Australia only. Yep.
That's very alarming.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it for questions for now.
Okay.
If anybody else has any more questions, please put them in the chat box, and John will do another Q&A session at the end of the presentation.
Okay, we'll keep going then. So these are sort of the do's and don'ts. Let me just of what to do when to avoid those scams, or avoid being dragged into it. So personal information, like I've stressed all the way through here, it's really important to protect your identity. You might say, well, look, I'm a person and I've got nothing to hide. I don't have lots of money, or whatever it is, but your personal identity, your information, your Medicare number, those sorts of things are still really important information for you to hang on to not share with people that you don't know, because your identity is your identity. It's important that you maintain it, not someone steal it from you and purport to be someone they're not. So it is important, even though you don't think anyone's likely to pinch your stuff, they may well do that. So again, be conscious. If something comes to you that you think looks a bit suspect, then be conscious about that and consider that possibility before giving money away to people, particularly this idea that someone's contacted you to say, well, look, we've got to undertake some medical expenses and so on. Please send some cash. Have a chat with somebody else. Have a chat with either perhaps an accountant friend or family member and so on. Always getting a second opinion is important. Don't be embarrassed to talk about it. Set a strong password on your phone and computer, and particularly these days with phones or tablets. I guess over time I've noticed folk have very little sometimes password protection on phones and tablets, excuse me. But we just use a swipe to unlock it. And bearing in mind, in this day and age, your phone often is your life. Photos, personal information, so on, is often stored on the phone. So don't assume that you'll never lose your phone, and don't assume that someone can't get into it. So setting up a PIN on your phone, particularly, and good passwords on your computer are important. Installing the right sort of software, antivirus software, anti-malware software is particularly important. And if you're getting rid of your device, then make sure the information is removed. So either break up the hard disk, or smash up your phone before getting rid of it. Come on. And so what not to do? A bit of the reverse, I suppose. Don't send money overseas unless you're absolutely sure about it. Certainly don't click on those unsolicited email and text message links. If you think there's something that looks a little bit legitimate, check it out. Don't act upon it immediately. And certainly don't be afraid to talk to someone about it. Because as it says here, you're not alone. A lot of people have been dragged into these scams, and it's best to discuss it with someone rather than act upon it, because you're a little embarrassed that you've perhaps fallen for something you shouldn't. With your mobile phone, you can certainly provide through your phone provider. You can track your phone. There are capabilities within both Android and Apple phones to determine where your phone is. Now, look, some folk may consider that something that they don't wish to do from a privacy point of view, but it can be handy to do if you do lose your device. Knowing your IMEI number, IMEI number, it's like a big long serial number, will come on the box when you buy the phone. But also you can access that number by typing on the keyboard *#06#, and that will provide that number to you on your keyboard, which you could then record. And bearing in mind too, your phone provider, whether you're with Telstra, Vodafone, Optus and so on, they will know your number anyway by virtue of the fact you've connected your phone to their network, and they can act to lock away your phone for you if it gets lost and stolen. A few little short suggestions here about, again, protecting your devices. Anti-malware software, similar to antivirus software, can protect your computer particularly. And Windows computers are generally the ones that are targeted by the writers of these pieces of software. And they can be anything from annoying adverts to software that will damage your computer and seek out information that you don't want to release. And there's some bits of software around, things like Bitdefender and Malwarebytes, but there are others out there. Some are free and some are paid for, that you can install on your personal computer to provide you with that level of protection. Next couple is based around passwords. People often say, well, what should I do for a password? And generally, if you're signing up for a new organisation, you'll get some guidance by that organisation about what's an appropriate password. But to be safe, generally 8 characters long, your password should contain both upper and lowercase letters, and often numbers and even special characters like the @ key and so on. And so just as an example there, you can see that if you like the word Daniel, for example, you could change that into the A substituting for @ or @ substituting for A, the L being substituted for the exclamation mark, and including capitals. So there are some clever ways of turning simple words into more secure words. But what you shouldn't do is just type the letters across the top of the keyboard. That's where QWERTY comes from as a password. Use the word password as a password, or a whole lot of numbers that are either the same or sequential one after the other. Using your first and last name, again, not a great idea. Using your date of birth, which may be known to others, again, not a great idea. Or the name of your dog and cat. That's perhaps less of an issue because obviously someone has to know the name of your dog and cat. But if you use Facebook, for example, and that is often the linkage between your personal information and then ultimately perhaps losing some money, because Facebook contains often a lot of your personal information, depending on how much information you decide to post. And you would be surprised how much of your profile someone could gather by viewing your Facebook information. So while you say, well, no one knows my dog and cat name, suddenly if they're a Facebook member and they've posted pictures of the dog with its name, that's how someone could gather that information. So answering that question earlier about Facebook, yeah, Facebook is more about ensuring what you disclose perhaps doesn't give away every personal detail of yourself, and certainly securing your Facebook account so it's only visible to your direct friends is quite important. And there are a lot of hints within Facebook about how to secure your Facebook account. So this is the last slide that Caitlin said you'll get some more advice in terms of these links, ScamWatch being the top one. So ScamWatch is the place or the website on which you would send reports to about scamming, but also you can gather a lot of the information that I presented earlier on from ScamWatch. Be Connected is, if you're looking for more information about digital literacy generally, and certainly there is a good section on scams within the Be Connected website. You can sign up for Be Connected. It's free, just needs a bit of information from you, and you can then gather and gain access to lots of material through that website for training purposes, for information and so on. So I really recommend having a look at Be Connected. The others are all government-based websites, consumer-oriented websites and so on, websites that help you, like as it suggests there, be e-safe. So they are really useful websites to look at. And that really ends the session today. And if there are some more questions that I can answer, we'll give it a go. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody, so much. I want to get to a couple more questions, John.
Yep.
And this is a really interesting point, and I'm wondering if you can address it. Elise says, I always feel very vulnerable every year applying for national police clearance, as the way to get it is online, and you need to upload a lot of personal details and pictures of your license, your birth certificate, Medicare card, etc. And it feels like you're giving the site everything they need to steal your identity, but we are told to trust it to get a police clearance to work with vulnerable people or volunteers. How can we be confident that that's not something that they're trying to steal our identity with?
It is a really good question, and the writer is absolutely right that you do upload your life. As it happens, one of my children needs to do that quite frequently, and we've looked at it together. I guess the critical thing about entering information on a website, and we talk about this a little bit more in an online shopping presentation that you might have a look at down the track, is being happy that the website you're accessing is secure. And the way to determine that is to look within the web address for a padlock, a little padlock symbol at the beginning of the web address, and also look for the words HTTPS preceding the words www. Now, you won't always see that, but certainly for secure websites you should see that. And that HTTPS, and I emphasize the F's because the S is the bit that stands for secure, is an important thing to see. So if the website that you're accessing has both the padlock and the S alongside HTTP, then you'll be pretty happy that your information is at least being securely transferred to that organization. I wouldn't wish to buy into what happens to it after that, but clearly the whole police and disability clearance stuff is quite extensive, and one would expect the government agency to treat it with the privacy concerns that it deserves. But yeah, I think the critical thing is ensuring that any website that you need to enter info into, like perhaps credit card details for buying and so on, it needs to be, and it must be, a secure website with that padlock and that S.
John, somebody's asked a really, really good question too that I bet is on a lot of people's minds. And that is, when you're on your computer, should you cover the camera with something so that people can't see you? Or is that like getting a little, like, what is that? Like, can you address that?
I've certainly heard people do that. I mean, you should be aware if the camera is switched on. And generally it would require some sort of software to be running in the background for that camera to be switched on and transmitting information to someone else. There's certainly been plenty of movies around where remote access to laptops that are sitting on a table somewhere can turn the camera on, and that's true. If there has been software loaded on a computer that allows remote access, then that person who has that access can do anything to that computer, which would include switching on the camera. So I think, yeah, if you're in doubt, then putting sticky tape over it, if it's on a laptop or a piece of paper, is not a bad idea. It's not something I personally do, but generally the camera has a light next to it that is illuminated when it's on. But I think if you're concerned about it, then cover it up. There's been information about some smart TVs that transmit information back to the manufacturers. So I think Samsung was tagged in that particular instance because they have a microphone voice activation system in some of their TVs. So yeah, I think you can always be a little bit cautious about what information you're providing or what access you're allowing people to your systems.
Excellent. Kylie, we have two more questions, and Kylie has asked, often people get asked to complete a survey, maybe via phone or email. Can this be a way to get your personal information?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And frankly, sounds bad, but I typically don't provide survey details anymore. I may, if it's from a retailer that I've just bought something from, so they already know something of me. They generally have your phone number, they'll have your email address, obviously, and so on. But surveys that come via the telephone, to be honest, whilst I think perhaps it's a little bit anti-community because there are ways of gathering information, but I tend to say no, simply because I'm unsure of the origin of that call.
Great, thank you. And one other question from Kathy. Oh, sorry, not from Kathy, we already answered that. One question from somebody who said, what about the cloud? I get bills emailed to my phone, is that safe?
So I get what emails from the phone? I missed the one word. You said
the person said they get bills emailed to their phone. Is that safe? Like we're talking about online, I guess, online banking and bill paying.
Okay, but billed emails, did you say?
They get bills emailed to their phone.
Okay, right. Look, I mean, well, going back to the first part of the question, cloud and cloud storage. I guess there's a lot of folk who are not keen to have their personal information stored on the cloud or documents and so on, bearing in mind that if you're a Gmail user, then lots of your information is going to be stored within the Google server system, which essentially is on the cloud. You have to ensure that your passwords are very secure in order to stop access to those things. But the cloud is with us, whether you utilize it to store your own personal information like documents and so on, I guess does become something of a personal choice. But security of your password is a critical thing for any sort of particularly cloud-based storage or email system. I don't think you can say much more than that. Yes, it's with us, and I guess if you don't wish to store your own information on it, you don't have to, but bearing in mind lots of organisations that you interact with may well do that anyway.
That's great, John. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And we suggest that you visit catalystfoundation.com.au and sign up for our newsletter. You can be alerted to upcoming webinars, upcoming presentations, things that are going on here. Also, I wanted to reiterate that we have a sort of a condensed scam safe presentation on YouTube, so you can check that out. I'm going to put the link in the chat box now. A scam safe presentation that you can is great resource for yourself or for others also. And you will get an email with those links about where to report scams, which I'll paste again here in the chat box, from Catalyst, again, along with a feedback questionnaire, which we really encourage you to fill out because it helps us in the future with future webinars. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and have a great day, and we will hopefully see you soon.